Órale, bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFP podcast. I'm your host, Jorge Martin, and today we are off to Los Carolinas. Yes, we're going to the land of great barbecue. Home for the Carolina Panthers, and joining us today he is a senior writer for Football Guys. He's also the creator of Carolina Fandom, the podcast, and he's also a graphic designer in his day job. So he's kind of Batman in the evening, putting on his cloak. But Jeff Haseley, welcome, bienvenido. Thank you for joining us.
Gracias. Thank you. Appreciate it. Happy to talk and come on and speak about the Panthers. So, yeah, we got a lot going on, and just like every football team does, everyone's has high aspirations beginning of the season, and Carolina had 5 wins last year, so they're looking to improve upon that in the very difficult NFC South.
And I love that you're joining us because you can, obviously you're entrenched with your podcast that's dedicated to Carolina sports, not just the Panthers, but obviously football is king. So we're very entrenched there. But also you could put the fantasy spin because you're an analyst with Football Guys. So I mean, this makes it a very happy marriage. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to buen amigo Jay Felicio. Jay, muchas gracias for connecting the two of us and getting us to do this. So otra vez, tip of the cap, muchas gracias. And but Jeff, this is a team that's in year 2 of the Matt Rule regime, and he got that famous long-term deal. And so it's also year 2 with quarterback number 2. And you've got Sam Darnold coming. Us out here in Los Angeles, we got to see the glory days of Sam Darnold with USC and working his way into being a top 3 pick in the NFL draft. Obviously, tough days happened. Adam Gase was not very kind to his tenure as the quarterback for the Jets. Obviously, there were some other injuries and illness that also played a part, but he's kind of coming to Carolina with a fresh slate, and Joe Brady with having kind of like an offensive guru. Can you kind of tell us we talked a little bit off air about kind of early prognosis on him, but what's kind of like the early look on how this whole new quarterback change is doing?
Well, we haven't really seen a whole lot of Sam Darnold yet. Just the one preseason game where I think he's done two possessions. One of them was, took over deep in opponent's territory. Didn't get it done, didn't score, got down to the 1-yard line and failed on 4th down to get a touchdown. So that wasn't too appealing. But you know what? That's kind of exactly what Carolina was last year. They were 28th in the NFL in red zone touchdown conversion percentage. And, that's something that they want to improve on. And they've added some players to try and, help that out. But ultimately, it has to come from the quarterback. And Teddy Bridgewater, that's kind of his, looking back at last year, that's kind of his issue, if we want to call it that, a weakness. It's great between the 20s, but then once you get into that red zone, that he's struggled with that. And I would think, though, that Joe Brady, who had so much success with LSU and Joe Burrow there, that they would be able to bring it home for in the end zone and have a higher percentage. But granted, they only had Christian McCaffrey for 3 games last year. So, I mean, that could be a part of it, right? I would imagine that their offense would be better with McCaffrey in the huddle, right? But as far as Sam Darnold is concerned, I think the word that I use for him, it's all about potential. Right? You already mentioned that he's got a good supporting cast. DJ Moore, right? We've got Robbie Anderson, who he's familiar with from the Jets. Terrace Marshall, who we'll talk about as a rookie who's taken over the Curtis Samuel role. And I already mentioned McCaffrey. I mean, there's a lot of teams that would love to have that lineup of wide receiver and running back. And then you throw in Joe Brady as a offensive-minded offensive coordinator in terms of his ability and his horizontal attacking style of offense. That shallow cross is really popular, and Carolina's speed really helps make that a type of offense that works well. So Teddy Bridgewater had a 69 almost 70% completion percentage last year. And the reason why is because they do a lot. Like I said, the shallow cross, there's more low, I don't want to say low, but like intermediate ranged passes, something that's a little bit more high percentage. So I think that's going to do well for Darnold. And I think Darnold is looking forward to being outside of the Adam Gase shell. And, he's got to have some confidence, a degree of confidence. Here's Carolina, Matt Rule. They picked him out. They handpicked him. We want you to be our guy, right? That's got to make you feel good. I think a level of confidence is going to go a long way when it comes to him. But the way that Carolina runs their offense, I think it's good for Sam Darnold. Doesn't have to make those long throws. We've seen Darnold have success when he's outside of the pocket, so he can do that if necessary. I don't know, man. It's like I said, it's all about potential. We're going to find out just how good he is in the first 3 weeks when they have their first game against the Jets. So he gets his revenge game right there, week 1 at home, and then home game against New Orleans, and then they're on the road at Houston. So they could potentially start out 2-1, maybe even 3-0, depending on how the Saints play, and because they're getting used to their own team here as well without Drew Brees. So we're going to know a lot, I think, by week 3 in terms of what Sam Darnold can bring. And it depends on who you ask, what they think, what's going to happen. Me, I'm kind of reserved. I'm hoping for the best. We'll just put it that way on what he can do for that offense.
So, I mean, I think, he's a quarterback who is, he's not being looked at as a starter. His ADP is definitely not among the top 12. He might not even be looking as a starter for Superflex leagues or maybe back end. Like I'm looking at ADP right now for Pro Football Calculator or Fantasy Football Calculator. Sorry, and he is.
Yeah, he's probably mid-20s in terms of ranking. Where the quarterbacks are, and that's to be expected. He has got the possibility, though, of moving his way up, but he has to prove it first.
And he ran a little bit in the past. Not necessarily to the Lamar Jackson level, but maybe like as much as I don't want to use the Ryan Tannehill comparison because, but somewhere in the 40 to 50 time range. Is that a possibility?
For this season, yeah, it's possible. I mean, he's never had any more than 44 carries in a season. That was his rookie year. I think that if he gets between 40 and 50, I think that's pretty, par for the course. And he scored at least 1 rushing touchdown in each of his years in the league. So, he has that capability. Quarterback sneak, do this. Perhaps run for a couple yards here. I don't really see him as a mobile quarterback, really, and I don't think people should look at him like that. But he is capable of gaining some yards, I guess, if you want to say, if it's open and available, he can do it. But they're not going to look to call plays for him to run, downfield. I don't see that. Not even in Joe Brady's type of offense. They have faster guys to do that stuff. So, and they don't want to get him hurt as well.
Well, let's talk about one of those faster guys. And this is the focal point of this offense. Christian McCaffrey, he's going off as the 101 in so many fantasy drafts. Luckily, I felt lucky to get him at the 102 in a Superflex draft over the weekend. Mm-hmm. There are the thing that I'm really happy about is there aren't that many concerns about him going into this season. He did not have surgery last year. The injuries were, it was an ankle sprain. It was a shoulder. Neither of which was a long-term. They just needed to heal. Mm-hmm. He's still fairly young. He's at the beginning of a long-term deal on the front half of the long-term deal. He had such a monster year in 2019. I don't know if we can expect that for this year to have another guy with 400 touches, but what kind of is the expectation for this year? And are they maybe looking a little bit to not extend them so hard with the idea of having him last through this contract?
Yeah, so I guess we'll start off with just this coming up this year and what we can expect. He had the high ankle sprain, he had the shoulder injury, nothing severe with those injuries. So it's not like it's an ACL where he has to come back and kind of adjust and gain confidence in his recovery. We don't necessarily see that, but and I also think that last year I think he could have come back earlier if necessary. If the Panthers were in the playoff hunt, I think he could have possibly come back earlier. They were just kind of freak injuries and when they happened. But I think he's going to be good. I mean, of course, he's the top back in fantasy. In the fantasy top 5, he's the first pick off the board most of the time, and the reason why is because he's essentially he plays 2 positions, running back and wide receiver, right? So you're almost getting 2 different players for one position. And that's something that we just don't see that often. Maybe with Marshall Faulk, we saw it, right? Because that was a huge point back when he played. And McCaffrey is the now version of Marshall Faulk. The touchdowns, I think, will be there. We're not. He scored 6 touchdowns in 3 games last year, so I don't think that's going away. I think they're going to run him well. He's well conditioned. He's ready to play. He talked about how he was just itching to get back in and play last year, and he kind of said that he, as much as he wanted to play, it was probably in his best interest not to. So yeah, I think that McCaffrey is someone that you can definitely rely on. It's not like it's a Saquon Barkley type of situation, and don't get me started on him because I'm a little concerned about his situation. I don't see McCaffrey in that type of role where you're going to be worrying or have a degree of uncertainty with him this year. I think he's going to be just fine. As far as his ability to handle the load, and will Carolina use perhaps Chuba Hubbard, their rookie, to take some snaps away, to take some action away? Only if Carolina is up big in the second half do I think that McCaffrey is really going to come off the field. I don't think they're going to substitute him that much, and he has mentioned this on his own that he wants to be in there. If he's healthy, he wants to be in there and play. So he just has to, do what he does, and we'll all benefit as a result. So, he's not a 300 carry running back. I mean, the most he's ever had was that 2019 season, 287 carries.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would be happy with like 250 carries, and if he has like 80 to 100 catches. To me, that sounds like typical McCaffrey, and maybe like 15, 16, 17 touchdowns. Anything more, I would say, is gravy. So, yeah, I mean, he is, like I said, he's one player who can play 2 positions and give you the fantasy points for both. So that's why he's the top pick in fantasy drafts.
Yeah, I mean, even at that, I mean, that would just be, and that's still going to put him, I think, in the RB1. I don't know who's going to get close. Maybe Dalvin Cook with a healthy season, but yeah, let's just say I'm feeling really good. I to tell you the truth, I ended up getting the draft where I got CMC number 2. I ended up getting Saquon Barkley at the beginning of the 3rd round. So
wow,
we don't need to get too much into that one. I'm following my friend Dr. Edwin Porras, who's very confident.
Yeah, he's high on him.
Yeah,
he's high on him. I'm not, but he's the doctor. I'm not. So hey, go with the doctor's opinion there. But yeah, we could talk about Barkley another time, I guess.
I mean, I don't love the offense, and I mean, if the line was better, and if I had more confidence in the quarterback, I'd feel better. But again, we're talking about the Panthers. Let's save this for offline. Well, let's go to the receivers. 2 excellent receivers, 2,000-yard receivers last year: DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson, who just signed a long-term, who turned his walk year into a 3-year deal recently. And there's Terrace Marshall. First, let's talk about that top 2. With there is the familiarity with Robbie Anderson and Sam Darnold. So there's that chemistry from the New York Jets days, whatever that was, because we talked about the fact that the Jets days weren't that great for Darnold. But again, there's the familiarity. What is there a target leader between these two that you kind of foresee?
Well, I mean, it's tough to see what's going to happen this coming year because now McCaffrey will be back. So if we look at last year's stats, it's going to be a little bit skewed without him. But Robbie Anderson was the top target receiver on the team. He had 137 targets to DJ Moore's 118. And McCaffrey is someone who is obviously going to take those away, but to a degree, how much we're not sure. But Anderson, I think, is his 95 catches last year. In my opinion, I think that's a career high. I mean, I know it's a career high. I don't think we're going to see him do that again or even come close. I just don't. One, because McCaffrey is going to take away some of those target shares, right? And also Terrace Marshall coming on will take some as well. And I don't know. I kind of see Marshall kind of taking over that big slot role that Samuel had. He's got speed. He can handle the contested catches. His catch radius is outstanding. We've seen what he can do after the catch. He had 23 touchdowns in 19 games in college at LSU. And that's with and without Joe Burrow. Without Joe Burrow, he had 10 touchdowns just last year when LSU was trying to figure out who their quarterback was, going through 3 different quarterbacks. And then he only played 7 games. And then he opted out. So, I mean, shoot, he has the ability to score touchdowns. And I think that's going to, his presence, I think, is going to be a little bit of a downside for Anderson. Maybe DJ Moore. DJ Moore kind of had those deeper targets as opposed to what Samuel and Anderson had. Like the shallow, the lower ranged, intermediate type of targets and routes. So Moore was good in terms of yardage. His reception total was down because of those longer catches. I mean, he had 18.1 yards per catch, which is a career high for Moore. He's not necessarily used to seeing that. And it'll be interesting to see how he'll be used this year, if that will change at all. So as far as the receivers go, fantasy wise, I would put DJ Moore first. I would put Robbie Anderson second because he had such a great year last year. He's going to be a part of the team. He just got the contract extension. That's not going away. But I do think that Terrace Marshall is going to eat into those receptions and yardage for Anderson. And also in the end zone too. And DJ Moore has 10 touchdowns in 3 years in his career. That's not a whole lot. And Anderson had 3 touchdowns last year. So the touchdowns need to come from somewhere in the wide receiver core. And I think that Terrace Marshall has an outside chance to get 5 to 8 touchdowns this year. He could potentially lead the receiving core in touchdowns just because that's what he does. He scores touchdowns. So I'm excited to see him in this offense and, how he's going to mesh with the other two. And Carolina uses a lot of, in their base package, they use the 3 wide receivers often. So I think they're all going to get play. And all of them have fantasy relevance. We saw last year that all 3 were top 25 wide receivers in fantasy. So I don't think that's necessarily going away. So Terrace Marshall is the guy that I'm kind of excited about. He's my sleeper pick on the offense.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah. Marshall, I mean, he's just such a pedigree. And I mean, he was so good. And, he also was really good in that 2019 season where they also had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. So he still fought through and still got some touchdowns there. So, that shows some talent. I mean, I know he kind of dropped in the rank in the draft a little bit because of some injury concerns from his high school days. So forget about that. So, no, I love it. Well, let's talk about the tight ends a little bit. And, we've got, we've got potentially 3 players to get over 100 targets. If we project Christian McCaffrey to get over 100 targets also. Terrace Marshall is going to get a lot. So that's 4 players. Is there going to be anything left for a tight end?
That's a good question. This is something. This is an area that I really kind of wanted to see more of in the preseason. I've seen it outside of the actual preseason games. I've seen it in the joint practices and the reports that I've seen from training camp. They're using the tight end position a lot, especially in the red zone. We haven't necessarily seen it in the preseason games yet, and a lot of it too might be that Carolina really doesn't have a whole lot of success in the preseason. Some, but they also don't want to show their they don't want to show their cards, right, in terms of their offensive play calling and such. But having said that, Joe Brady wasn't necessarily a big part of the LSU team that had success with tight ends. We didn't really see that in LSU. It was all about the receivers, and we saw that last year. They had 27 catches to. I'm talking about Carolina. They had 27 catches to tight ends last year. Only the Patriots had fewer. I think they had 15.
Wow.
Yeah, so 27 catches, not a whole lot. And that was Ian Thomas, who had 20 himself. So what they did was they signed Dan Arnold in the offseason from Arizona, and he's coming off of a career year himself where he had, 38 catches, I think, 400-something yards and 4 touchdowns. But one thing about Arnold, he's fast, he's tall, he's 6'6", and he's 225 pounds. That doesn't really sound like a tight end, does it? Right? Because tight ends are like 6'5", 6'6". Okay, fine. But they're like
240 to 250,
260, maybe a big one. So Dan Arnold plays more like a big wide receiver, and that's kind of what I'm thinking his role will be, especially in the red zone. I don't necessarily see him as a guy between the 20s, maybe a third down type of guy, or maybe a guy who can, find a seam and an open opportunity on first or second down, but I don't see that really as his main role. I see him more as a red zone threat. And I told you before about the 28th in the NFL in terms of red zone touchdown percentage. Dan Arnold is going to be someone who is going to be a big piece of their offensive play calling inside the 20. So Arnold is someone to watch as a sleeper. I mean, like I said, they had 27 catches combined to their tight ends last year. So, how much of that is going to increase? I mean, it could increase, but is it going to increase a lot to make him fantasy relevant? I don't know. We will see, but I do think he'll help the offense. Ian Thomas, I think, is kind of relinquishing his role to Dan Arnold. I kind of see Arnold being the main receiving threat as a tight end. So Arnold would be my guy. If I had to throw another sleeper in the offense, it's Arnold. It's 6'6", 220. I mean, he is actually, I think what I remember seeing is he is 20 pounds less than Kyle Pitts, and his 40 time is 0.2 of a second slower. But other than that, they're the same person. Not really. I'm going
to clip that. And put it on Twitter. So
anyway, Dan Arnold is someone that I am paying attention to, and he had a good year last year. Arizona didn't really use the tight end position much either, and they historically haven't done so. So for him to come to Carolina, and remember, he also had some experience with Joe Brady in his time with New Orleans too. So they do have that level of connection already. That they have that rapport, and I think that's one of the reasons why they brought him in.
Outstanding. Well, let's go just a little bit to the side of the tight end, the offensive line. It's a group that seems to be rebuilding. It's going into the season. Pro Football Focus has it ranked number 30. And obviously the offensive line is going to be very important so that Darnold does not see ghosts out there. But obviously he's not seeing. We don't want him to see any defensive lineman in his face. What is kind of like the prognostication for this unit?
So their best offensive lineman is Taylor Moton. He's their right tackle. Could he play left tackle in a pinch if he had to? He could, but he's a right tackle. That's where he's played before. That's what he's used to. That's what he excels at. He's good there. Left tackle was, if you recall, they drafted Greg Little a couple years ago in the second round as a left tackle, and he hasn't really amounted to much. He's had injuries, he had a concussion. They let him go. He's not on the team anymore. He's traded. So he is off the team. And so they have kind of a revolving door at left tackle right now that is going to include Cameron Irving, as well as Trent Scott. They have Dennis Daly, who could play the role as well, and he can also switch over to guard. Left guard and right guard, they've got Pat Elflein, who you may recall him from the Vikings and the Jets. He's kind of, he's just kind of a journeyman. John Miller is someone who had some success last year. Matt Paradis, you might remember him from Denver. It was an All-Pro in Denver, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. He got a leg injury, and he signed his contract with Carolina, and now he's been with Carolina for a couple years. I would say he's decent, but I mean, it's not one of the best centers in the league. And I think the reason why Carolina's offensive line is ranked 30th is because they're kind of lacking that cohesiveness, right? They haven't necessarily played together. And when they have played together, they haven't necessarily played that well. I mean, some of them have, but it's just it's a work in progress is their line. Instead of going with offensive line, say like Rashawn Slater with their 8th pick in the draft, this previous draft, they went with J.C. Horn, the cornerback. He was the top corner off the board. They could have gone offensive line here. And if they went offensive line, then we would be thinking, well, what are they going to do at corner now? Right. So it's one or the other. You can't have both. At least they tried. And there was also talk about them taking a quarterback. Right. But then when they handpicked Darnold, they realized we don't need a quarterback anymore at 8. We can go to a different position. So essentially, but with that, the opportunity to trade for Sam Darnold, they were able to get a corner in their draft and kind of get 2 positions out of the deal. If you kind of see what I'm saying. So their offensive line it's like I said, it's a work in progress. They have their good days, they have their bad days. And Christian McCaffrey's presence on the offense alone is going to really help all the other players, the offensive linemen included. And I think that with a little bit of success and some continuity between them, I think they could have a pretty decent year. I don't see them as the 30th offensive line in the league. I don't. They might be ranked that way now, but I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised at the effectiveness that they have. And they also need to make sure that they are not allowing sacks, of course, on Sam Darnold. We don't want that. And one thing I didn't say is they did draft a tackle, Brady Christensen from BYU, in the 3rd round. So he's someone who is coming on, and they're thinking that he might play guard. It's possible that he could switch to guard as opposed to tackle. So he's kind of a depth piece. I don't really see him as a starter right now, especially not right tackle, because that's Taylor Moton's role. But offensive line is a work in progress. We'll put it that way. And as I said before, McCaffrey just kind of makes everyone better. Defenses don't know what play the Panthers are going to run. There's so many different options. When McCaffrey is lined up out as a flanker, he has the opportunity to, as a route runner, really put some wrinkles into the defense in terms of who they want to cover, especially the linebackers on defense. Who's got McCaffrey? All right, well, if you got him, who's going to get the wide receiver or the slot who's coming in on a slant? There's just so much you can do with that shallow cross offense, and McCaffrey is a huge piece of that. Hopefully, the offensive line doesn't need to stand on their head in order for the offense in general to be successful.
Well, let's go to the other side of the ball. There's been so much investment on the defensive side of the ball. I believe in 2020, all the entire draft board was defensive players. So J.C. Horn, you mentioned J.C. Horn. Mm-hmm. This was a team that had trouble defending the run last year. So what is is it more of the same? Do they look like they could be improved against the run? Are they going to be better against the pass? How does this team shake out when it comes to how fantasy players are going to attack them?
Well, I guess let's start with the defensive line. Brian Burns is the highlight right there of their defensive line. I think he's going to have a great year. There were so many times last year where he got really close to the quarterback on a strip sack, almost touches the ball coming around the edge, and just didn't get there in time. Well, if the secondary can do their job and cover better, I mean, we saw Carolina in like a zone type of coverage most of the time last year because and teams were just picking them apart. They didn't have that player like a JC Horn who could. They didn't really have the whole team in terms of the secondary who could play that man or that close coverage right on receivers. So they played a lot of soft zone, and it hurt them. It just did. The pass rush couldn't get to town, and at least not as effective as they wanted. They were able to make some plays, but I mean, in terms of their pressure, it just wasn't there all the time, and that was something that the secondary had to make up for, and they struggled to do so. So getting JC Horn was a big piece of that to help out. If he can be the type of shutdown corner that they want him to be, or at least if he can kind of potentially eliminate one side of the field that a quarterback is looking at, I think their defense is going to be much better. And they haven't really had that since Josh Norman back in 2015 when they were 15-1 in their Super Bowl year. So that's a possibility. Just the defense improving as a result of strong corner play. And the ability to do more man coverage as opposed to zone. I like Brian Burns. I like the combination of him and Hassan Reddick, who's coming off the edge as well. They got rid of Denzel Perryman. They traded him to the Raiders. And I think the reason why they did that is because Jermaine Carter is someone who has shown that he can handle the green dot, as the leader of the defense. There's a rookie who is coming on strong. His name is Frankie Louvu, who's shown some what am I trying to say? Shown some he's impressed people. Potential, that's a good word. He has impressed people in the preseason. So he's someone that I think will make noise. Who else? Let's see. I mentioned Reddick. Oh, and Shaq Thompson, who they have, who's more of like a weak side linebacker. I mean, their defense, as I said before, with the offense struggling in the red zone, their defense was rough as well, especially on third down. Only the Titans had the worst third down conversion percentage. I think they were like 51%, and Carolina was right below that, like 59 or 49%, something like that. 49% of the time, teams were converting on third down against Carolina. There was a stretch against Atlanta, Tampa, and New Orleans where in 3 games, Carolina only forced like 2 punts, something like that. No, yeah, it was bad, right? So this is a 5-win team, and they have a 5-win personnel. So they're trying to get better, and they're doing so by adding players in certain spots. And they're young too. Jeremy Chin is an outstanding safety who can also play some cover linebacker roles as well. I really like him. Dante Jackson's kind of coming into his own. Who else? I mentioned JC Horn, Derek Brown, of course, defensive tackle. They need him to kind of step up, and Daquan Jones, who they have, to kind of be those run stoppers and be able to shed blocks so that the linebackers can make plays. It's a work in progress. I think the success of what Carolina does this year is largely going to depend on what they do on the defensive side of the ball. They allowed 25 points per game last year and only scored almost 21.8. So they need to switch that in the opposite direction, of course. Right. Score more and allow fewer, right? So that's the plan. You do that, I think you're on top, right? Or at least you're doing better than most of your opponents are in that case. Their defense, in my opinion, is an area that I think is going to improve. but it's a work in progress as well. Just like the offensive line, we're going to see. I mean, they've got some strong players who can make plays. I love Brian Burns' potential. I think he's if you do fantasy IDP, Burns is someone I think who could have like a top 5 defensive lineman season. He's that good in terms of sacks, fumbles, forced fumbles, tackles for loss, and tackles as well. He likes to tackle the ball. So yeah, their defense is fun to watch when they're on. When they're not, it can be a struggle.
All right. Well, Jeff, this was fantastic. And I love the insight. I feel so much more educated on the and our listeners are going to feel more educated once we put this out there. So, but I have one more question, and it's not food related, and it could be a part of a two-part question. This being a Latino focused podcast, we love to talk food also. And what I've been asking people is, what are their favorite types of tacos? And if there's somewhere if there's somewhere you want to plug that maybe they'll give you a free lunch, feel free.
Oh, wow. How about nachos? Can I say that too? And I will say tacos too, but there's a really, really good barbecue nacho. Well, there's a number of different good barbecue nacho places. One is at Duckworth's Tap House and Grill. They have the best barbecue nachos. I love them.
Please explain the barbecue part.
So it's basically pulled pork on top of nachos, right? So you got everything. You name it, it's on there, right? Jalapenos, okay. Chives, yes. Tomatoes, right? Hot sauce, whatever you put on nachos, but also throw some barbecue on there, and
heaven on top of heaven
on there. What's that?
Heaven on top of heaven.
Heaven on top of heaven. Yeah. It's definitely a meal for multiple people, right? It's a good meal to just kind of dip in and take your fill. But yeah, you can't eat one whole plate. Not really. As far as tacos are concerned, I really like shrimp tacos. One, because they're not they're calorie friendly for one. And of course I like that. I like a blackened shrimp taco, something that's a little bit more Cajun-y, got a little bite to it. So yeah, I would say that. I'm not really a fish taco guy. I'm not a fish kind of guy to begin with. And you throw it on a taco, it's like, I don't know, not really my thing. But shrimp, I like that. I've had crab tacos before, but I prefer the shrimp. So yeah, shrimp tacos, that'll be my go-to for my specific type of taco that I like. Soft taco too. I don't like the hard shell. I would prefer the soft. Give me that flour tortilla.
The hard shell has to be made, not the kind of like with the taco with all the taco fillings inside, not the hard shell that you get at the store and then you just fill it with stuff. No, that's an abomination. Please don't ever do that. And you've got an official Mexican to tell you not to do it that way. I do have a question because I did get this answer from someone in Kansas City. Have you ever done? You talked about barbecue nachos. Have you done official Carolina barbecue tacos?
I want to say I have. I can't pinpoint exactly where I had something like that. I mean, anywhere you go around here in the Carolinas, there's going to be some sort of some sort of a barbecue presence, right? Whether it's a taco or if it's a pizza, like a flatbread. Oh, the flatbread pizzas with barbecue, those are good too. Nachos, as I mentioned. So all kinds of stuff. I'm sure I've had barbecue tacos before. I just can't necessarily pinpoint it.
Oh man, it's kind of something.
Barbecue on top of a burger. That's good.
Oh, geez,
that's good.
And I just had lunch out here on the West Coast, so I'm already getting hungry for dinner.
Yeah, brisket on a burger. That's good. Burnt ends. Oh man. Yes. One also good place that's around here that is really good for barbecue is the what is it? Midwood Smokehouse. Awesome. Really good place.
All right, Midwood Smokehouse. You owe my man a free lunch. Okay. dinner for two, maybe, maybe just charge him for the beer. Okay. So,
Yeah,
oh
there's
man,
a lot
Jeff.
of different places, but yeah, those are my go-tos.
Oh, awesome. Jeff, this was such a pleasure. I love it. I know we went a little bit further than the time I promised you. I just,
It's because
please, I
I
want
can
you
talk.
to,
I can keep talking and rambling, so I apologize for that.
believe me, it was all informative and I really appreciate it. I really want to appreciate it, but I want to give you the floor. Please feel free to plug your work, especially the great stuff at Carolina Fandom that's under your creation. So please feel free.
Sure. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Jeff Haseley. You can also see my work at footballguys.com. I've got a weekly column that I do during the season that's called Fantasy Overview, which kind of takes you through week 1 all the way through week 17 now. Or actually 18,
18.
right? So I kind of stopped that article before the last week. No one really does fantasy on that last week, but anyhow, just kind of help and guide your way through like the first couple of weeks. Obviously you're looking at the waiver wire. Who are the players that are performing well that are going to stay performing well? Who can you find on the waiver wire? Who can you drop safely? Who can you look at in the coming weeks because their schedule looks good? That kind of thing. So I will start to kind of pinpoint players that I think are doing really well on their team and you need to take note of, or, someone who he had X amount of snaps this week. He didn't really have a lot of receptions, but boy, he was used a lot. And he's someone who could potentially be a fantasy target down the road in a couple weeks. So I kind of walk people through the fantasy landscape going from week to week. That's called the fantasy overview. So I do that. You can find my my podcast too as well. I do a local podcast for the Carolinas called Carolina Fandom, and that's all about meeting and getting to know and talking about sports in Carolina. A lot of that is the Panthers. You've got the Charlotte Hornets as well. You have the Charlotte FC, which is a new MLS team that's starting in 2022. So a lot of people are excited about that. So that we do that. Of course, we're talking to fans and how did you become a fan of such and such team? Tell us about your fandom. What do you do on Sunday mornings for the game? Do you have a man cave? If you do, what's it like? We talk about all kinds of stuff. I have as I mentioned before, you mentioned that I'm also a graphic designer. So I design, among other things. I've done T-shirts and different apparel for the Carolina Fandom fan store. So there's all kinds of different Carolina gear, like this hat here that says Carolina Fandom. That's one.
Sweet.
This shirt, although this you can't really see it, it's the Panthers, and each one of this is a name of like a player who's played since their creation back in 1995. So all kinds of players. Wesley Walls is on here, right? You got Jake Malone, Steve Berline,
Kevin
Steve
Green.
Smith, so they're all small, tiny little names and stuff. So that's kind of neat. So if you're interested in Carolina gear, check out the Carolina Fandom Twitter page, and the link to my store is on there. But yeah, other than that, shoot, that's a lot, right, Jorge?
Absolutely. But hey, man, I don't know when you sleep, so I gotta love it. Gotta love it. How often are you gonna publish podcasts during the season?
We'll do one once a week. We'll do one once a week. But last year we did a lot of recaps, game recaps, and I don't necessarily want to get into that. There are other people who do that, I think, better than us. I enjoy doing it, and that's fine. But it takes a lot of work to do those, and I don't really have the time to devote to the game recaps like I did last year. So it's more about the fans. How do you feel now after the game? What do you think is something that we could improve on? We might talk about the game. What was the stadium like? What happened here? So I mean, it's more of a fellowship type of podcast that we're kind of evolving into. Yeah, we will still talk about the game and maybe break down some things. But as far as like breaking down film and showing videos and stuff like last year, I think we're going to probably move on from that. But who knows? Maybe we'll throw some things in there. We'll see.
You never know. Some of it could apply to the next game. You gotta love it. Well, muchas gracias. I so appreciate it. I so appreciate the knowledge, the time, and you made me hungry. So, oh my goodness. Well, familia, eso es todo for our show. Please, thank you to Anchor for being our hosting network and putting our podcast out on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Please make sure to subscribe and leave us a review when you get a chance, por favor. And also thank you to YouTube for being for putting our faces out there and getting us out there on the video side. We're enjoying that. And please make sure to hit a subscribe and give us a like on this one. You can find original content at familiaffb.com. You can find me at Jorge Martin 17. Oh, I got that right. Yay. And as well as at Familia FFB on Twitter and Instagram. Otra vez, Jeff, muchas gracias. As we love to say, estás en tu casa, you're always welcome. And remember, everybody, todos somos familia. Salud.